Greetings everybody. We're going to switch gears and move away from trees and shrubs and start talking about turf grasses. There are over 10,000 species of grasses in the Poaceae family and over 700 species of grasses found in the state of Texas. Let's look at some of the benefits of turf grass, and there are many. I'm not going to go through this entire list. I just want to talk about some of these benefits. I think soil erosion control is probably a no-brainer. Enhanced groundwater recharge and improved surface water quality. These have to do with the fact that being a plant, turf grasses have root systems that can capture and filter out a lot of pollutants before they get into our water supply. Heat dissipation. This refers to the fact that as a plant, turf grasses have to transpire, and in the process of transpiration, they're giving off water in the form of a vapor, and that has a cooling effect on the grass plant itself and also helps with the dissipation of heat. Skipping down to the sequestration of carbon dioxide, this relates to the fact that, again, being a plant, turf grasses photosynthesize, so they're absorbing water through their root systems and taking in carbon dioxide through their open leaf stomata, and along with sunlight they're able to create oxygen and sugar. So sequestration of carbon dioxide means taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and incorporating it into biomass. Production of oxygen, well, again, that's a photosynthetic property because when plants photosynthesize, they make oxygen. Turfgrass morphology. The morphology of an organism refers to the things that you can see on the outside. Anatomy refers to those features or structures that you can see on the inside of an organism. If you're referring to the morphology of a human, you're talking about a bipedal organism that has a head with two eyes that face forward, 2 arms, 2 hands, 5 fingers on each hand, 2 legs, 2 feet, 5 toes on each foot, and so on. Those are all morphological features. This slide has an illustration of a typical grass plant showing its morphological features. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. Let's go ahead and break this down into smaller pieces. Grass plants grow differently than other plants. And one of the features of grass plants is the fact that they have a leaf blade which eventually becomes a sheath, and the leaf sheath wraps around the stem of the plant. So ligules are membrane-like tissues, or they could be rows of delicate hairs found at the junction of the leaf sheath and leaf blade. And the reason they're important to us is because they can help us identify the particular species of grass that we're looking at. Auricles are small ear-like projections located at the base of the leaf blade. And auricles can come in basically 3 different types, as you see pictured here: claw-like, short and stubby auricles, or they can be absent. The collar is a light-colored band located at the base of the leaf blade. And this band can come in different configurations. It can be broad, as you see pictured to the left. It can be divided into 2 sections, as you see pictured in the center, or it could be narrow, as you see pictured to the right. inflorescences. Here's a definition for an inflorescence. An inflorescence is a group or cluster of many small flowers that are arranged into a larger structure. And in different species of grasses, there are three basic types of inflorescences. So on the left you see a special type of inflorescence that's called a raceme, and then in the middle a panicle, and on the right you see a spike. Inflorescences are important to us again because we can use them as an identification feature to help us determine what species of grass we're looking at. Stolons are a term that I imagine most of you have already heard before. So my definition of a stolon is a modified stem growing on the soil surface that's capable of forming adventitious shoots and roots. So any species of grass that produces stolons is referred to as being a stoloniferous species. So here's a nice shot of stolons on St. Augustine grass. Rhizomes are also modified stems, but the difference between rhizomes and stolons is essentially this. Rhizomes are found beneath the soil surface, and stolons are on top of the soil surface. So rhizomes are modified stems found beneath the soil surface that again can form adventitious shoots and roots. And we refer to species of grasses that can make rhizomes as being rhizomaceous species. So in this picture you can see all the rhizomes. So the rhizomes are the thicker threads, and then the roots of this particular grass would be the finer, more delicate thread-like structures. All grasses have the ability to produce tillers, and a tiller is a young stem with leaves, which also goes by the term shoot, that develops from the crown of a grass plant. So when you plant a grass seed in your lawn and it germinates, over time it'll produce tillers along its sides. The tillers kind of allow the plant to spread out. So tillering is the process of grass plants producing these shoots off to the sides that develop from the crown of the grass plant. Okay, this picture just brings together all the terms that we spoke of just a second ago. There are some other turfgrass characteristics that are of interest to us. Let's take a look at those. There are three turf quality definitions that we want to consider. The first is density. So you can kind of think of density as being the number of plants that you have in a certain area. Over on the left you see a turfgrass that has high density, and on the right a turfgrass that has lower density. The second turf quality definition that we want to look at is the texture. And just like with trees and shrubs, texture referred to the thickness of the leaves, the width of the leaves, the width of the stems. With turf grasses, texture refers to the width of the blade of grass. So in fine textured species, the blade width would be very narrow, and in coarse textured species, the blade width would be wider. The third turfgrass quality definition is color. So not all turf grasses have the nice green color that you see in the picture on the left-hand side. So some turf grasses have more of a yellowish green color. Let's take a look at cool versus warm season turf grasses. So what's the difference between cool and warm season turf grasses? So if we look at this chart, this shows us daily air temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, and then growth on the vertical axis. And the cool season turf grasses are outlined by the blue curve, and the warm season turf grasses are the red curve. So if we begin with the cool season turf grasses, we can see that they grow best between the temperature range of about 60 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. On the other hand, the warm season turf grasses seem to grow best or have an ideal temperature range between about 80 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Cool season turfgrass species are not well adapted for most Texas environments, and here are a couple reasons why. They have low water use efficiency, and this has to do with the fact that cool season turf grasses are for the most part what we call C3 plants. So there are different metabolic pathways during photosynthesis. There are C3 plants, and C3 plants comprise probably about 85% of all the plant species on Earth. And then there are what we call C4 plants. C4 plants metabolize or photosynthesize slightly different. As it turns out, the C3 plants are less efficient in warmer climates, especially warm, dry climates, and the C4 plants are more efficient. So most of our cool season turfgrass species are C3 plants. Most of our warm season turfgrass species are C4 plants. Now there's a video that I put in the folder for today, Tuesday, which has a video that you can watch that explains the differences between C3, C4, and cam plants, which you would typically find in the desert. So cam plants would include cacti, for example. Okay, another reason why the cool season turfgrass species are not well adapted is they have low nitrogen use efficiency. They're not very efficient at using nitrogen. They have an ideal temperature range of 60 to 75 degrees, which means that they're not going to be growing well during our summers, which are much warmer than that. They have a higher disease incidence than the warm season turf grasses. And some of the cool season turf grasses lack the rhizomaceous or stoloniferous growth character that allows them to recover from stresses. And some of those stresses would be drought, pests, foot traffic, compaction, things like that. Warm season turf grasses are well adapted to Texas for the following reasons. They are higher water use efficiency species because of their C4 metabolism. They're better at using nitrogen. Their ideal temperature range for growth is between 80 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that, they will be able to grow and thrive during our Texas summers. A lot of them are drought hardy, and a lot of them have the rhizomaceous and stoloniferous growth habits that allow them to recover from those stresses that we spoke of earlier. This slide illustrates the difference in seasonal growth between cool season and warm season turf grasses. So starting at the top with the cool season turf grasses, growth begins in the spring and continues until the summer temperatures start to warm up. When it gets warm during the summer, growth will slow down, and in some cases the plant may even go dormant during the summer if the temperatures are very warm and if soil moisture levels are very low. Growth can resume in the fall as temperatures begin to cool off again, and then as it gets really cold towards winter, the plants go dormant. On the bottom, the warm season turf grasses, growth begins in the spring and really takes off during the summer when conditions and temperatures are optimal. And then finally, growth begins to slow down in the fall as the weather cools down, and the plants will go dormant during the winter. So this is a nice little slide that shows you where a lot of the important turfgrass species that we use in the United States come from. So what parts of the world do they come from? Bermuda grass is native to Central Africa. Bluegrass, fescues, and ryegrasses are native to Europe. Buffalo grass is a native North American grass species. This slide identifies important warm and cool season turfgrass species. So on the warm season species side, we have byegrass, Bermuda grass, buffalo grass, centipede grass, seashore paspalum, St. Augustine grass, and zoysia grass. On the cool season side, we have annual ryegrass, creeping bentgrass, fine fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, and tall fescue. Let's look at some of the more common warm season turf grasses that are grown in Texas. This is a picture of Bermuda grass, and on the strength side, Bermuda grass is heat and drought tolerant. It can handle a lot of foot traffic, and it's a fairly disease resistant species. On the weakness side, Bermuda grass is not shade tolerant. It does not grow well in shade and wouldn't do well under the shade of larger trees. Okay, there are hybrid species of Bermuda grass that you can mow lower. These species have more inputs, meaning more water, more fertilizer inputs. The common species of Bermuda grass is very hardy and can actually be seeded, whereas hybrid species need to be from sod or plugs. Zoysia grass is another popular turf grass in Texas, and you can see it's doing well in this picture under filtered shade. On the strength side, it is heat and drought tolerant, it is shade tolerant, and it is moderately tolerant to foot traffic. It tolerates cold temperatures well and has low inputs, low water, low fertilizer inputs. On the weakness side, though, it tends to grow very slowly. Centipede grass is referred to as the lazy man's grass because of its low input requirements, low water and low fertilizer inputs. Those are its strengths. On the weakness side, it is not very tolerant to foot traffic, salts, high pH, or shade. Seashore paspalum is tolerant to salts and high traffic, but on the weakness side, it is not very tolerant of cold temperatures and doesn't grow very well in the shade. St. Augustine grass is very shade tolerant. That is a great strength of this particular species. Grows well in the shade. It's very stoloniferous. But on the weakness side, it is not very tolerant to foot traffic or cold temperatures. Buffalo grass, drought tolerance, and has low water and fertilizer input requirements. On the weakness side, it is susceptible to several different diseases. It does not tolerate foot traffic very well. It requires high amounts of nitrogen fertilization. Finally, this slide summarizes the different warm season turfgrass species and their strengths and weaknesses. That's it. Thanks for watching.